What is up, down, and sideways, all you beautiful individuals? It is another rep of League Unlock. Eric and Mark here with you. Fine, feathered individuals to get a little bit hype rolling, get the train going for the World Championship 2025. Today we got a special one. We're going a little back to give some flowers and remember some of the more forgotten world champions over the years. And I know when you go back to season 1 or 2, to most people they're all forgotten because they never knew who they actually were.
It's a healthy reminder that yes, we've got a pretty long history here now built up within the game of League of Legends, and especially when you are turning back that dial and looking all the way at season 1, season 2. Easy to understand that there are even a lot of long-standing fans that weren't around or following the game at that point. So certainly understandable that those are going to be there. I think a little less so with season 2, just because of how big and kind of miraculous of an upset it was considered. I think that Taipei Assassins team does carry a little bit more recognition outside of it, but still, you're looking at season 1 and 2 as absolutely the bare bones of the memories here.
Yeah, and guys like Toys are pretty iconic in the name, even if you weren't watching them. Even guys, season 1, Expeke and Suche, I think most people know those names, but first deep cut we're going, and we'll go kind of chronologically. How about Cyanide on season 1? You know Expeke, his future teammate, of course, but Cyanide was on this roster winning a Worlds title and relatively short-lived career. Again, at the end of 2014, I think is when was the end for him. But if you like that J4 Fnatic skin, you got Cyanide to thank.
One of the best of the early eras of those World Championship skins, I truly think, and certainly one that we do see every now and then pop into that competitive scene when someone's rocking the J4. Got to give that shout out to Cyanide. And I think that kind of one of those things that does got to be prefaced with talking about that short careers. It's not necessarily about individual performance or anything like that. This is just simply, again, reminding and remembering careers were really, really short back in the day. And that's also a combination of, people didn't know you could make this a career at that point. And also, sometimes the money wasn't there enough to make it a career at that point or to that type of level for enough guys. I think that's where Cyanide falls into that one. But certainly one of those names that did have an impact is important when you're looking back in the scheme of things for season 1. Gets a little bit lost on the wayside.
I think most guys weren't making enough money circa 2011 to 2014. Even you've heard stories when the LCS started in 2013 from, I think it was guys like I'm a Cutie Pie, like their team was paying them in like peripherals for the computer. Like they're barely having a salary, right? So very different to what the modern League of Legends and esports in general scene is looking like. But yeah, obviously the game, and apologies for your eyes showing season 1 clips. The map was tough to look at back then.
It wasn't so bad maybe 5 years ago, and I know saying 5 years ago, that's half a decade ago type of situation. It didn't look so drastically different, but absolutely now it's certainly an eyesore going back in time and seeing what we used to call the beauty of Summoner's Rift.
So season 2, as we alluded to, you kind of know the Taipei Assassins. Season 3, even the kind of lesser known guys like Pumandu on SKT, everybody still knows who SKT is. You're familiar with all of them. So we jump to 2014, Samsung White's dominant year. Yes, Dandy's an icon of the jungle. Mata changes what support is. Pawn is the faker killer. But what about Looper on the top side? I think he is the forgotten member of this squad and was playing Fearless Draft in his own mind before Fearless was even close to a thing. My guy was playing Akali, Alistar, Kassadin, and of course, you got the singed, iconic World Championship skin.
He was really one of those players that made you examine what you felt the actual champion role was, when you could see him roll and flex through multiple things and just play what seemed like on any fancy or whim what he wanted to make it work for the squad. That's what Looper did great for Samsung Galaxy. And one of the things that you got to be talking about with that team and looking at that success is, well, if you are of the mindset where you've gone back throughout history, gone back into the memory banks and gone through to watch it, I think you absolutely recognize and will remember Looper's name and have that type of history. Otherwise, you're left off of the scraps. And I mean 1 or 2 scraps that were left in the LCS days of Looper. And I think that's where you get a lot of people easily forgetting that he had accomplished. He was successful over in the LCK beforehand. And when you look at what you had in the LCS, I think you could say it was almost not, it certainly wasn't Looper, is kind of the way you could identify at that point.
Yeah, and he went on quite a journey after that World Championship. First, he was part of that big Korean exodus to the LPL, had some good times on RNG, where he was still a top-tier top laner, but yes, then you get to the Echo Fox era, and to the surprise of nobody, that is where the career ended. I don't know if it was maybe him going, yeah, I don't need any more of this. Maybe people saying maybe he's not quite at the same level, but he was still fine in the LCS. But we know Echo Fox as a whole was just kind of a sinkhole for people's careers.
There's a lot of things going wrong within the organization as far as talent development or talent maintenance. I think even at the base level, when you're talking about some of the star players that were brought over, Looper can go into that category. And I think as well, behind the scenes, there is a little bit of that has to just go on the individual and the accountability and all those type of things. But again, also remembering this is one of those early era players still, and did find a way to, again, we're seeing, if you compare his career and you're looking at Cyanide, again, we're seeing start to lengthen out. We're starting to reach more so the territories that we are familiar with as far as these careers.
And again, he was on such a star-studded roster that he was kind of easy to be the one that's lesser known when you had the most dominant bot lane in the world at the time in Imp and Mata, Pawn and Dandy. There was only so much that could go around in terms of attention and accolades. So Looper definitely the forgotten about member of that squad. Next guy gets, I don't want to say controversial, but saying he's forgotten as a world champion is maybe an overestimation, but I think people do forget a little bit that Easyhoon was not only there in 2015, and maybe more of it is, he won the spring split 3-0. Faker didn't even play in that one, and he did go 4-0 at the World Championship, and he had the highest KDA among all mid laners in 4 games, so pretty small sample size. He had more gold share than Faker in those games, and I think most importantly, the biggest point on the resume for Easyhoon, if I was him, is he made Faker the Azir player that he is now. Because I know Faker said, you have the audacity to say this guy's better at Azir than me, and 10 years later, Azir's far and away his most played player and one of his most iconic champs.
You can't tell me that any of the world championships that Faker and T1 have accumulated since then, he hasn't gone to that skin meeting and gone, well, what about Azir? And they go, let me show
we already have one, sir.
You were there for that one, sir. And so, yes, absolutely, Easyhoon does fall on to this list. And I think it's one of those ones where, unless you are, again, have been watching since that point, or are a diehard T1 Faker fan, and you go through the history and understand how the legacy was built up, you won't know Easyhoon and his impact on the team. And I think you're right in calling out that not only is his impact and role that he played within that World Championship and season run of that is impactful. You can go and find individual moments where he is playing a hero role, playing a main character role for the T1 team, but you also can look at the legacy that he left behind, the seeds that were planted in an early young professional like Faker. And no question, I think what you saw from the interactions between these two, how he carried himself as that professional, as that elder player almost on the team, was able to rub off on what we see and how much we love the way that Faker presents himself today.
Yeah, it seemed like it was kind of the transition to him really stepping into that leadership role, right? As a veteran mentor. It's obviously gone much more than that from there. But Easyhoon also, by the way, some of the most unintentionally coldest lines and interviews he's had. They ask him about, like, how does SKT make the 6-man roster work? And I remember him being like, well, maybe it's possibly because I'm really good. And you go, yeah, let me write that down, sir.
Oh yeah, no, he certainly had that edge where it was that era of sometimes where, again, Riot would bring you out for whatever interview and they would really set you up with these softball, meatball questions to try and build up rivalry and dynamics. And it didn't work with Easyhoon because he was just so cut forward and straightforward with his answers that sometimes it actually did hit as that promotional type of one going through. I think that he is a very special player when you look back at the history of the game, and especially when we're talking about players that kind of get lost in the shuffle of these world championships rosters, of these star players and the legacies that move on. He certainly is one that gets a little bit to the wayside. But when you really look into it, absolutely, his fingerprints are still there to this day on the T1 dynasty.
Another guy that I think, if you ask the skin trivia question, who has the SKT Azir skin? Everyone's going to say Faker. It's Easyhoon. You say, I love that Samsung Galaxy Ezreal skin. Ruler played it so well at that tournament. You go, oh no, I'm sorry, sir. That skin is from Mr. Haru in the jungle. Yes, remember when jungle Ezreal was a thing? Number one. Number two, Haru played a single game at the actual World Championship. He sprinkled some games in the LCK, but one game at Worlds, it was on the Ezreal. He did play it very cleanly. They almost lost to Fenerbahce. We ignore that. They ended up winning that. But one game before, in 2018, Haru really took over that starting jungle spot from Ambition.
To be fair, that is a Fenerbahce that we did eventually within the next year or two see was one of these ones that could throw a wrench into teams' plans on the international stage. So they get a little bit of a brief respite from that one. But yes, the Samsung Ezreal that everyone will assume is with Ruler because of how fantastic he is. It's a bottom champion. This has got to be where it works out. It was that meta of the jungle Ezreal, that jungle item so broken and busted. Everyone's building it bot lane, wherever you are.
Good times,
trying to get that advantage. Oh, yeah, surely. And yes, it is Haru that lands on this one. And I think it's certainly one of those ones where a lot of people recognize this skin. The skin recognition of, yeah, there's a Samsung Galaxy Ezreal. Like, they know that one. But knowing that it is Haru and where it ties into the jungle and everything else, absolutely, that one is the wild card that I don't think many will get.
And, of course, when Haru does take over the next year, we have the Gen G era, and that's the infamous 1-5 group stage. So we forget about that, and we remember the World Championship era that was one whole game. But, hey, that's all you need to qualify to get that skin.
That's absolutely true. My boy got it. And yes, you better believe that when you look through the history of sales for skins, I'm sure he's outpacing a lot of his other team members here on that Samsung Galaxy squad.
And a lot of definitely more iconic players than him, which is why picking the right skin is important in terms of making sales, because these guys do get a cut out of that one. Another forgotten about guy, and often disrespected. We're going to 2019 Fun Plus Phoenix, Gimgoon in the top lane, who, yes, if you just look at his numbers from that tournament, you're going, this guy won the whole thing? But you got to remember the play style that was FPX, and Gimgoon was definitely not the guy getting the bulk of Tien's attention at the time. He was the epitome of a weak side top lane player because Duembi was already cooking something crazy in the mid lane. Tien was like the carry mechanical god at the time, and LWX was a guy they had confidence in. So Gimgoon was at the bottom of the totem pole in terms of FPX.
I think it's a little unfortunate because I know when you look back on it, not too many people are overly enthused or overwowed by the FPX skin line, I think, at the end of the day, even if we obviously, of course, had the wonderful story of Duembi picking Malphite for his wife and then going...
You're not talking about making money off a skin. It ain't Malphite.
I should have picked something else because she doesn't even play the Malphite now, and I didn't even get anything back from this skin or anything else. Gimgoon, on the other hand, rocking the Gangplank. And I think that this is one of the more underrated skins that we do have within the World Championship lineup. And of course, Gimgoon, so fittingly, is one of the more underrated players for what he did, what he could provide. And frankly, even outside of the World Championship aspect, what his career was within the LPO.
Yeah, and he actually had a pretty clean Gangplank, which was not a typical... A carry pick was not typical for him, but this guy went toe-to-toe against... There were some heavy hitters in the top lane in the LPL at the time. This is peak the Shy. This is when Zoom was an absolute menace on that top side, and Gimgoon, he wasn't going to dominate laning phases like that, but he more than held his own in that direct head-to-head against the Shy in these semifinals.
There's a lot of times where, again, yeah, you're right. It is that monster on the other side of the rift. It is that more proactive, star-studded player on the other side in that position that was trying to build those advantages against Gimgoon in the weak side, and it just wasn't happening. And he's able to come through in that mid to late game team fights, have the angle, have the agency that the team needs him to have to play out a role for them and enable the rest of the squad to make the plays happen. I think that's where he's truly was shining at the World Championship run for this FPX squad.
Another guy that was shining or was kind of not talked about turnaround moment. We're going to the Damwon Kia. Were they Kia at that point? I think they were just Damwon in 2020 when they won that first World Championship. They didn't have the sponsorship money yet. But everyone knows Showmaker, Canyon, Nuggery, Barrel, all these guys. But how about Ghost in the bottom lane? Another guy who I think, I'm not going to say overrated or underrated, but just disrespected. If you recall at the time, Ghost was actually the turning point for this team when they started dominating. They were okay with Nuclear, but as soon as Ghost joined the squad, they went on a run, started winning the LCK, and it's probably the only time at this Worlds that I remember a Dom1 bot lane actually being dominant in the laning phase.
Yeah, and I think it's really important that you did mention out that beforehand with Nuclear, you had a mixed bag of success and consistency for that Damwon team. But as soon as Ghost came into the lineup and what he could provide, what he was enabling the team to do elsewhere as well, that was a big factor in what was going right for this team and how they were able to truly hit that maximum potential of all that early talent, young talent that they had on this Damwon squad. Ghost is one of those ones where I think it's unfortunate because, yes, a world championship is going to be the peak of your career. But for most of these guys, you're trying to say, okay, if that's the mountain peak, well, where are the valleys? Where are the hills as well, where you can kind of see that there is other successes and everything else? Ghost doesn't necessarily have that. And that is the problem, I think, when you're talking about his legacy and the long stay of remembering that he is a world champion and was an impactful part of that roster that did matter and making it the championship team that it was. Goes with that there wasn't any real follow-up successes or mountains or hilltops that he was able to achieve.
And yeah, obviously, the success for him and Damwon continued to the next World Championship where they lost in the finals. But yeah, after that, it's a steep drop. And I think when you had guys like Showmaker, Nuggery, Canyon, it was easy to place blame on a guy like Ghost. He was kind of the first scapegoat and even probably at times unwarranted. Maybe he wasn't at the, he wasn't a top 2, top 3 AD carry in the LCK. But if I recall at the time and all the time, it's a pretty stacked top of the list.
It is, and I think it's the kind of the curse that must go around with this Damwon squad that you can bring up iconic star players like Showmaker, like Nugger in the top side, Canyon. You can have Barrel, the general, in the bottom lane. But it always has seemed like that ADC position is the one that has the question mark, is the one that when things start to fall apart or nothing, everything goes wrong, that's usually the first place that you're pointing and wanting to improve, wanting to switch around type of thing. And I think it all really kind of starts with Ghost when we're looking at how these, how the history played out after the World Championship runs.
Before we get to the last guy on this list to talk about, two guys that we didn't include. Number one, Junjia on EDG, who beat Damwon, we were just talking about in 2021. Didn't technically play a game at the main stage, which is why we're not including him. And this guy went on to have a storied career outside of EDG as a premier MVP level jungler in the LCP. And then also, if you looked at IG 2018, you could easily say Duke, a forgotten world champion there. But he already won Worlds with SKT. So he's not really, everybody knows Duke,
Yeah, but they're both very interesting options when you're talking about him because Duke is one that does get relatively forgotten. Frankly, you just mentioned it now kind of did refresh it in my mind, but it instantly then plays back. Well, during that World Championship run, Duke still did play games. He played impactful.
Had to prevent the Shy from getting too tilted,
Exactly. So there was a role that he played within that team and is, yes, but it is kind of overshadowed due to him having prior accomplishments and achievements with T1 SKT. And yeah, Junjia, the other side of it, who has come out of having been a world champion, where basically he is the guy that you recognize and know from that EDG championship team, even if obviously moved away from the team, from the region in that type of respect. You see him step on the international stage. You see him, you're reminded and instantly almost going, oh yeah, that's a world champion still over there, no matter where he is or what region and what team he is playing for.
And his trajectory actually is probably better than JJ's, who got all the starts after that World Championship. You want to talk about peaking during that Worlds. But the last guy to actually talk about Also, didn't play a game on the actual main stage. We're going to the DRX Miracle Run 2022. You already know. Again, didn't play main stage, but 2-0 in the play-in stage and played most of their gauntlet wins. He was 5-1. We're talking about Juhan, and if you remember going back to that Worlds, it was like, is Piosik gonna start at this event?
It was one of those ones where you didn't know if you could even trust Piosik to be that starting jungler for that DRX squad at that point. And what you saw, you knew that, okay, there's maybe some more explosive potential available, different compositions, different options for the squad when Piosik is in. But when Juhan is in, the consistency, the base level, the calm that seemed to be there for the team absolutely was something to keep track of and give credit to. And yes, was a factor in even getting to the World Championship, getting to that playing stage in the very first place for a squad like DRX is his performances through the gauntlet. And as well, to add in, we also knew the nugget on the side that he played a massive role in when Piosik does step into that lineup and maintains that starting role throughout the World Championship, and keeping that mental focus there, keeping that energy, that self-belief that you need to be having to perform and to keep all outside noise out as you're getting to these bigger and bigger stages within the World Championship. Juhan definitely played a role behind the scenes with the rest of the team for that one. I think kind of one of those ones that, again, how do you quantify it? How do you remember and measure it type of thing? But certainly one that I don't want to be left out when we are talking about him and revisiting him as a world champion.
He's kind of like the evolved form of what Duke was doing for IG, because he prevented Piosik from getting tilted before it even started. It was in the back room going, it's fine, Piosik. You can play Hecarim. It's all good, brother.
So that's what wrong with Team Liquid. We didn't bring over both Piosik and Juhan to get the combo action going on.
Nobody told Steve. Oh, man. Steve had to do it.
But it's certainly one of those ones where I think Juhan and what he was able to do for that DRX team is going to be one of the ones I don't want to be forgotten when you're looking back on these world champions.
So we 07 salute to Juhan and all these other guys who maybe were a little bit forgotten but deserve their flowers just the same. But that is it today for League Unlock. Eric and Mark here with you. Absolute beauties. Thank you so much for hanging out.